Hi, I'm Jennifer Jill Araya.
And I'm Sarah Beth Goer.
Welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast, where we discuss the art and craft of audiobooks, and we aim to go deep quick.
Hello and welcome. Today we're here with producer Amber Beard. Amber, it is so exciting to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
We are a podcast that likes to go deep quick, so I'll just dive right into the very first question. Amber, when you are planning to cast an audiobook, how do you decide? You know so many different narrators. How do you decide out of the many, many narrators you know, hey, these are the voices to pull in for this audition? How do you discern?
Yeah, it all depends on the book. I mean, the book is the roadmap, right? And I read the book and I think about what the needs are, how many characters, do they need a certain accent skills, or, would a certain frame of reference or background be beneficial? Talk with the author as well about what they've been thinking about in terms of, bringing their book to life, the character, what their voice might sound like. I had a production recently where, it's set in New Jersey, but there's no explicit mention about New Jersey accents or anything like that, because everyone is pretty much from that area. But I told the author, I was going to do some auditions, and she was very adamant that she wanted the narrator to have a New Jersey accent. Not a strong one, but it seemed like it reflected part of her background and it was important to her. And so, it's always good to confer with the author and see what they're thinking, because it can change. I kind of had to reset and pick different people to send her way. Because some of the people I picked that initially that I loved and she loved weren't able to do that accent. They just didn't have that as a frame of reference. But yeah, the book and talking to the author, sometimes if it's a broad book and there's no really specific casting requirements per se, or can, cover a wide gamut of people, I'll do a public audition, which, is always it's exciting, but a little bit daunting because you can get hundreds of auditions, right, to go through. But it's a really great way to maybe hear someone that you know in a different light. And that way you get a different context for their voice and it opens up opportunities for them. Or there might be just talent you just don't know, because I can't know everybody. I do feel like I know a lot of people now, but I don't know everyone. And it's always great to find a hidden gem, as they would say. They're not hidden, but hidden to me at the time. But so yeah, it's always nice to find new talent that way. And then with private auditions, yeah, it's just that kind of thing I was mentioning, certain requirements, whether it be language or just tone, people that I know that I might have worked with before, or I've heard other producers have worked with, or, there's a buzz book going around and they did a wonderful job on it and makes you curious to see if they might fit your book because it's a similar kind of tone or genre, or just people I'm curious about. Maybe I haven't worked with them yet. And I just want to see, if they might be a good fit for this book.
I'm curious if you're ever in a circumstance where maybe you want to put together, 7 auditions, but you thought of 15 different people who would all be great on the book. How, when that's the case, you narrow down, you know what, these ones and not these ones.
Once I actually listen to the auditions?
No, prior to listening, if you just have, if the people who come to mind, there's a bigger pool than or in those cases, do you just ask everybody to audition?
Yeah, I'm usually pretty generous because you just never know. Someone could surprise you, or it could be that, you're a little bit on the fence. I don't know, but the way that they approach the text could be something unexpected, but that works really well. I've had several cases of that where we're not sure, but maybe, I think they have a great range to maybe be able to do this, but I haven't ever heard anything, or they don't have samples or something that reflects this. But yeah, and they turn it in and it's wow, that's so cool. I really enjoyed hearing how they were able to interpret that in their own way. So that's the fun thing about audiobooks and narration, I think there's a lot of room for a filter and interpretation via the narrator that even me as a producer and the author might not expect, but that can really enjoy. I'm
Y-
like, yeah.
Yeah, what really strikes me about everything you've been describing about the audition process is this, like, the value of exploration. The
Hmm.
way you talk about, hey, maybe there's a narrator and you're like, "Ah, I'm not quite sure, but I think maybe," that you offer them the audition. Or if it's very open, you go, hey, let's do an open audition and learn and explore and discover. Maybe I'll hear someone I know in a different light. Maybe I'll hear someone I've never met. Like, I'm really struck by, like, how juicy it is that the audition process is this exploration process, and how that is integral to the craft. And it's subjective. There aren't right there may be
Yeah.
some wrong answers, but there aren't right answers necessarily
Yeah,
either.
totally. And, maybe that person, like, I don't want to say I'm right, but yeah, like they're not a fit for that book. But I think, wow, they showed me something that I still wasn't aware of, and maybe they'll be great for another book. They'll come to mind for another book. Like, okay, I've seen that they can kind of navigate, text in this way. So it would be really interesting to put them on something else that they would be a better fit for. Um, so yeah, that can happen too.
Mm.
I love that. So we've been talking a lot about how you decide who's going to audition. I want to dig a little bit more into the now you're listening to and evaluating those auditions. So when you're listening to that, 100 auditions that you get because you've posted it on Ahab, or the 20 auditions that you asked for because you were throwing a wide net and didn't want to limit it, how do you determine which auditions you're going to send to the author, or which one rises to the top if you're making that decision? I mean, what makes one audition stand out over the others?
Yeah. I remember the days when I did public auditions myself, or all auditions myself, but especially public ones. And I did have to find time to filter through all of them. But now we have our lovely casting team of Lucas and Ashley here at PRHA, and they conduct our auditions and they help us filter through, if there's hundreds and hundreds. Um, and so we definitely trust their ear, and they still send a generous amount of auditions through. And then while I'm listening, you know, it's subjective. Like we say, I have my own kind of like interpretation of the characters and how I feel like they might sound, or their kind of vibe, their tone. Also taking into consideration the author, if I've talked to them before. But I always leave room for like a wild card. I call it my wild cards, someone that might be a little bit off of what I was thinking, but obviously could do like a really wonderful job and they had an interesting take. But obviously auditions, you haven't read the whole script. The narrators haven't read the whole script. They don't have tons of context. I try to provide as much context as I can that the casting team can share. Any important like notes from the author about, that character, so that everyone has like a really fair chance, of doing their best job. But, people are like traveling sometimes and they're in a hotel room, or they've got dogs or kids running around or whatever, So I totally get like, and I always tell the authors, like, it's not going to reflect the final recording. Even how the narrator is reading might not reflect exactly how they're going to, approach the text once they actually record and are prepped and, in a comfortable environment and all of that. But there's just something about when you can hear a narrator connect, and that's kind of a thing that's not totally quantifiable, but you can hear it, you can feel it. It's something that they're grasping who this character is, that the emotional points are coming through in an authentic way. Um, and yeah, that are not just reading it, they're not just throwing it away. I know it's hard with auditions, like I was saying, that it can be distracting, but sometimes you can really hear that distraction, and you hear the narrator is not connected to the text at all. And I know it can be a challenge, but I think for narrators doing auditions, even on the fly, like just try to find some space to like sink into that little bit of the character and the piece, and really try to like give it your all, because it really comes through. Um, but yeah, I think that's what I listen for. Also, if there are specific accents or different things like that, I will listen to see those sound, you know, believable, proficient in those. And then, um, yeah, that's pretty much how I narrow it down. Yeah. You have to kind of just cut it off somewhere. And then it is a kind of thing it's truthful that like you hear someone and you start comparing, you have your bar set, right? You're like, I really love this person's audition. So you kind of can use that as a barometer for other auditions. Okay, someone in the wheelhouse of this person. But then also, like I said, I do leave room open for some wild cards, I call them, that might be a lot different than that, one audition, but could be something that could be really cool.
I love that you highlighted how important that connection to the text is, even if that interpretation that results from that connection is not one that you would have expected or necessarily chosen if you were the one doing that performance, but that connection still needs to be there.
Yeah. I mean, we're all humans filtering things through our different lenses, and that's what makes this kind of work so fun and exciting. Like, that's my favorite part of my job. One of my favorite parts is casting. I just love just seeing what can come out of something, how it can just have a whole new kind of turn in life. And, you know, the listener can have a different experience completely than just reading the book.
Have you ever had an experience where both you and the author like absolutely love equally like 2 or 3 different interpretations that came through? And if so, in that moment, how do you decide?
Hmm. Definitely have come across situations where an author has been like, oh, I like these two people so much. I don't know. How can I choose? What do you think? Should I ask my mom and my grandma and my neighbor, like what they think? I think that's a good problem to have. And then usually I'll just sit and I'll really like re-listen to the auditions or the samples and think about, um, like, okay, let's really think about this narrator and their approach and, you know, who might have an edge over the other in terms of the key things that we want to hit, or to come out of this performance. And sometimes it can be very hard. And you kind of just roll the dice and like, let's try this person first. And then, we always have backup, people, and just in case it doesn't work out. But yeah, I think it's just sinking more into the text and what the goal, like the author wants, what will make the author happy, what will serve the character, the story the best. But it can be tight sometimes, it's not always an easy decision. And like I said, that has happened many times. The author, like, let me ask my, like, my circle of friends or co-author, other authors and things like that, what they think too. So, and then I'll put my opinions in there too. Like if there's somebody that I think just based on, because the author might not have the knowledge I have about like other work they've done or things like that.
What I find exciting about what you just said is something I hear in it is when you've got 2 or more really amazing options, then the depth of craft can get even more nuanced, right? Then you go, oh, okay, like these are both awesome. So what's like awesome plus,
Yeah.
Which is also still subjective, of course, but informed. It's not random.
Yeah. And sometimes, usually I pick sides and I'll just pick a portion of the manuscript that I think encompasses like, the gamut of what we're going to experience in the book, a little dialogue, some narration, different characters, if they're important, like they're going to reoccur often. But sometimes in that situation, a few times I've done it, is where then I ask the author, or sometimes this can happen beforehand if I know the author's really picky, but I ask the author, what part do you want to hear? Because I know that you have a certain section in your book or part of the story that you want nailed in a certain way, or you want to come across in a certain way you feel is very important. So I'll ask them what they want to hear and then do the audition that way, or have them redo a little section, this new section, just so that kind of can sometimes tip things in a way, as well as another kind of narrowing down process. Mm-hmm.
Honing in on the author's subjective interpretation, but that subjective interpretation, you know, is then will match the vision they had for, and that kind
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah. Because, there could this be this pivotal scene and people can approach it, narrators could approach it in slightly different ways that are both all valid, but it could, just strikes you. You just feel it like, oh, this feels right, quote unquote, Yeah, and that can help hearing those kind of sections too.
That definitely brings up like an interesting and controversial question for me, because I think we all, like across the board, tend to make the assumption that like the author's perspective on what they imagine and what they want to hear is uh, really important and maybe should be the deciding factor or a major deciding factor. And it kind of brings up questions to me like, since art is so subjective, have we arbitrarily assigned higher value to what the author heard in their head versus like the amazing art that could happen that's not what the author heard in their head, but there's this other version that could exist that is equally
Mm-hmm.
amazing? And why was the author's vision inherently more valuable, or is the author's vision just like a great way to decide because there is no objective way to decide, and hey, this will make the author happy, and why make the author unhappy? So that's kind of what that brings up for me, and that I find really intriguing about the
Yeah,
book.
I mean, as a producer, I'm not going to put anyone forth that I don't think would be a great fit for the book. And if there's a situation where the auditions are all not hitting for me, I will redo them. The authors don't pick who auditions or who I put forth. So definitely and like I said, I put my wild cards in there, but I don't tell the author that. I just put everyone out there, here, these are great people that I think could be a great fit. Let me know what you think. So if we get to that point where we do need to narrow it down further, it's already from the group of people that, um, and I'm subjective too, but have not. It's not like the author is leading the charge. But yes, we do definitely want the author to be happy. I've not had it quite, but I know other producers have had little, contentious discussions with authors about, no, 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 really go with this person. I think they're going to be like the best fit, just because it's, they really feel like they'll nail it. Not that another person wouldn't, but, they're just really want to advocate for that narrator. So, I mean, I think we're all in the realm of being able to do that, though, if we feel strongly about it.
Well, here's our next question, which is, okay, there's like good, solid narration. This works. It's really excellent. What in your mind takes like really solid narration to stellar narration? Like what qualities turn that narration into a stellar performance, and why? And can you give us an example of a book that demonstrates this stellar narration?
Ah, goodness, that's a hard question. In a way, it's hard. Because again, I think, and it could just be how I am too, because I'm an INFJ. And so
Me too.
oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a very intuitive person. So it's like sometimes something you can't really like I said, quantify, put your finger on, but it clicks. Like I start getting goosebumps and my heart rate starts going a little faster just listening, but I think it is that number one thing of connection to the text in every whatever perspective they're reading from. And also world building, I think we definitely know when we have a chance as producers try to put it out there that narration is just as important as dialogue. And I understand dialogue can be fun, doing the different characters and everything, but narration is the world building. It's the tone setting. You're sucking in, the listener, and you're creating this cocoon of a space, transporting them to this world, and the book. And being able to do that well is a gift, and a skill. The pacing, which you do that, using punctuation in your favor, your breaths, your pauses, all of that can do so much, to set the tone, to just really engage a listener. And then on top of that, of course, character work, having your characters feel really distinct, like real people. An author sent me a message the other day about the review for her book that just came out. It's called The Lost Story. The author is Meg Schaefer, and it was read by Georgina Marie. And someone on Instagram had said, "Oh my gosh, I love this book so much." And I didn't even know. I thought there were two narrators narrating this until I just looked again, and there's only one, person reading this book. And being able to distinguish your characters to that degree is amazing. I remember one of the first books I listened to when I started in audio, like 7.5 years ago, was, I forget the name of the book, but I know the narrator was Brittany Presley, and she had to navigate a lot of male characters in the book, and they were Southern, and I was just like, she's doing this, like she's doing these voices. So some people have that ability to just like really like manipulate their voice, and really become every character. But it doesn't have to always be like to that degree, but just feeling like that narrator is making those characters believable and real, relatable in whatever way that they are, or interesting, the writing does a lot with that, but the narrator is there to amplify the writing, right? And just add more dimension to it. So I think that's what makes stellar performances. I mean, one of my favorites recently that I worked on was While We Were Burning by Sarah Kofi, and Carissa Backer and Henriette Zutamu, hope I'm saying that right, narrated it. And they both embodied their characters so well. And it's a juicy novel, and it touches on so many interesting and relevant social, racial, societal topics, but it's also like romance and thriller. And it was a fun book, and they both like embodied their characters so well. Also, Jay Myers does the Horrible Bag series by Rob Renzetti, great animation fame. And he just does all these crazy voices for all these kooky characters. And the narration is done like in a kind of British voice. And like the main characters are these little kids, like a little boy and his sister. So there's just tons of like crazy character work on that. And I think he always does like a magnificent job. So there's tons of books I could mention, but those are some that come to mind.
Thank you for sharing those titles. And what I'm hearing from you is that it's really important that the tone and also the level of character voices matches what the text requires. Because
Yes.
That sort of animation-like series that you were just talking about, it really does need all of those kooky voices.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the other books that you were mentioning, you need distinction in those character voices, but the level of differentiation or extremeness in those voices is determined by that text.
Yeah, totally. The text is always our guide, for sure.
I also really appreciated what you had to say about how important the narrative is as well. A little side story is I have an excerpt from a thriller that I recorded that I use with my audiobook coaching students, where the scene is 4 pages of just setting out the layout of a hotel suite. And it gets so bogged down. However, if the narrator doesn't do a really good job setting up that layout of the hotel suite, there's a scene later where the bad guy gets in off of the balcony. And if the listener doesn't already understand where the rooms are in relation to each other in the hotel suite, the fight scene, when that bad guy comes into the suite, makes no sense whatsoever. So the listener has to know that world. Understand the world. And it comes from 4 pages of narrative that are right at the beginning of chapter 2.
Yeah. The narrator has to show that that's important, through their voice. They have to point that out. So yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
And I love, to address that challenge, I love that image you said of the cocoon of the world. That image, like when you said that, that so struck me, because I'm like, yes, that's how I feel when narration is really good. I feel like I'm in my own little cocoon with this narrator and this story.
Yeah.
And I can imagine like, well, that is what you have to know as a narrator. Like if I just, because I could approach a scene like the one you're describing, Jennifer, being like, let me make sure that this is all very clear, that you really understand what this layout is. And that will not be as compelling as like, let me bring you into the world of
Right.
what's happening in this layout. And I think a lot of narrators might act, without consciousness, or beginner narrators, right? They might err towards the first way because there's just like a description on the page about the hotel, and not have the skill or the insight to understand, like, wait, our job is always to create the cocoon. This author put this here for a reason. What world am I creating for?
Well, why is that character paying attention to all of this?
Exactly.
What is their
So well
motivation?
So well put.
and we're talking a lot about fiction, but I want to speak to nonfiction as well, in terms of like, that's all usually narrative, right? And it's explaining a lot of things. There's various topics you could be talking about. Obviously, memoir could be closer to, a little bit more of a fictional kind of thing. But I think people that have the skill, narrators that have that skill of nonfiction, it's like finding how to make this text that's explaining a lot of things engaging. What is the joy in it that the author, wrote about this because they are an expert in this field. They want to share this knowledge. They want to impart something to their listeners, to the readers, and tapping into that and figuring out how to make that dynamic, just as dynamic as any other kind of narration. So, just wanted to give a nod to nonfiction there, which we do a lot of. There's a lot of nonfiction out there.
I love that you brought in nonfiction. We did a special nonfiction series, and by the time your episode airs, our special bonus episode with Dion Graham on the nonfiction series will have aired too.
Yeah.
And I would say like the number one common theme of the special nonfiction series is what you just said. And so I cannot tell you how much it like delights me that you naturally, organically was like, yes, and all of these amazing craft things, they apply to nonfiction. Like, I feel like it's just this beautiful like button on the discussion.
We're all in agreement.
Well, believe it or not, Amber, we are actually already on to our final question that all three of us will answer.
Nice.
And the question is about what is exciting you and really lighting you up about the craft of audiobooks right now, this moment, today. And Sarah, I'd love to hear your answer first.
Absolutely. Okay, so today, this is really me just like geeking out about how amazing narration is. Very specifically, narrators work on dialogue, on the characters and the dialogue. It blows my mind how just the human voice alone can bring alive so many different characters, right? And in some cases, like we talked about, that also includes the incredible skill of the vocal differentiation. And it sounds like there are multiple narrators speaking, right? But also in other cases, it's literally like you can tell it's all the same narrator. There's not like a wide vocal range or like, incredibly skilled technique going on in terms of the vocal changes. But even then, the incredible skill of one narrator embodying multiple humans in such a fully realized way that like we can tell who they are and what they're like, sometimes what they're thinking, or sometimes even like how they're moving in that moment as they say that. Like it is just mind-blowingly amazing that that's something the human voice can do. And I think I didn't actually think of this until just now, but like this is me again saying like what humans do that AI can't, because the reason these people come alive through just the voice is because it's not just the voice, it's the soul and the spirit that we're bringing forth. It's just amazing. It's incredible. And I'm geeking out about it today.
I love that. Audiobooks are such a cool art form.
Yes.
They are, truly.
Well, Amber, what about you? What is exciting you right now about audiobooks?
Something that's exciting. I recently just produced a chunk of books, and they all just had like very the stories called for very specific kind of backgrounds, realms of experience. And I thought, wow, it's making my job a little more challenging, but it's also really wonderful that, I need to find a Plains Cree, hopefully indigenous narrator to narrate this one middle grade book. I need to find biracial, Asian and African American women to narrate this thriller. That I need to find someone who can narrate in a British accent, also in dialogue, use French and Scottish accents and English accent, and I think authors are getting a lot more specific, pulling from a lot more, you know, not commonplace backgrounds and worlds, and I think it's really cool. It's really fun. I think I learn a lot. I learn about new narrators, and just different ways of seeing the world, and of course I don't know everything, and so it's always great to be able to learn and experience things through certain people's eyes and experiences. And I'm learning too how connected authors are to their books, even if it's their fifth book they've written. There's something very personal about it to them, and it reminds me to always treat each book uh with that kind of care. And it could be my, 15th book I'm casting this month, but, to the author, this is everything. It's their baby. And to the listener, it's going to be a fresh new experience. So just always to kind of keep that in the forefront of my mind. It's fun. Keeps it all fresh.
I think
love that.
the diversity that is entering the publishing world in the types of books that are being published and the actors that are able to narrate them is a truly beautiful, wonderful thing. It just makes me think that, the people that need to see themselves in the literature that they consume will be able to find themselves in these books, both in the characters and in the voice that's telling that. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, there's room for everyone's stories, and we want to hear them all. I love bouncing around different worlds. It's fun. That's the beauty of fiction, literature, right? Yeah.
Well, I will answer the question last. The thing that is exciting to me about audiobooks right now is maybe a little bit different than the way that I've talked about this in the past. So right now I am reading a book that's was actually, when we're recording this, it was released this week, a book called The Artist's Joy by Meredith Height Estevez. And the book is a guided meditation for artists with the purpose of rekindling creative joy and wonder in the artistic work that they do. And truthfully, it has really helped me be re-excited about audiobooks. I mean, I absolutely love my job. I love the work that I do. And, I've got a deep passion for this art. But especially the last couple of months, I've had a lot going on in my personal life. Nothing bad, just a lot. And I've had a really busy recording schedule that included, some bumps and electronic issues and all sorts of things, and books that came in way over the length that they were estimated to be. So my schedule was crammed, and it was just a really complex and full schedule. And reading this book, The Artist's Joy, has just really helped me to sink back into the joy of the creative work that is audiobooks, despite the external stuff. And so what's exciting to me right now about audiobooks is that it brings me joy, and that I can inhabit those characters with creative abandon, and it's really fun. So, yeah.
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I have friends that work as artists and graphic designers and things too, and I used to work in my previous job, worked with a lot of screenwriters and artists and things too. And I think people forget that creatives need to be reminded too. People think, well, it's fun. You're doing something fun. Like I have to, do data entry or whatever, whatever job they might have that they think, oh, that's way more fun than my job. But it's still a job, and it takes a lot of investment emotionally, mentally, physically, and everyone needs to be reminded why they're doing what they're doing every day. Why are they devoting 12 hours a day to this particular thing? So that's awesome. I love that for you.
For sure. It's been a very wonderful journey of looking inward and finding that why I'm doing it, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's been good. It's been very good. Well, Amber, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. This conversation has been truly delightful, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience and your expertise and your time with us.
No, thank you guys so much. It went by so fast. It was fun to chat. It's great to talk with you both too.
Thanks so much for listening to Crafting Audiobooks. We've been your hosts, Jennifer Jill Araya
and Sarah Beth Goer.
Wishing you happy audiobook listening and/or crafting.
Bye for now.